You're recording.
Excellent. And we are live.
Hey,
Okay.
John.
So welcome back to the Mind Meld PR vlog. And we are happy to have you. I am Jonathon Narvey, your host, the founder of Mind Meld PR. And once again, I have a wonderful guest who's going to tell us lots of stuff that I don't know because this is outside of my expertise in PR. We're going to talk about the tactics that you could use for business development. So I'm, I think the starting point here is, let's say you've got some media coverage. That's fantastic. People have heard about you, your brand, your product. You're part of the conversation. That's a nice advantage to have. But what do you do with that? So we've recently talked about sales in another vlogcast, but here we're getting into some brass tacks tactics of business development with Cecilia Lu, a business consultant in Vancouver, BC. I don't think I've ever mentioned where this takes place. So here we go. Good, now you know, we're on the West Coast. Cecilia, you're someone who, like many of my guests, needs no introduction, but they kind of deserve one, don't they? So I'd like you to sort of give your origin story, tell us how you know what you know about business development. Go right ahead.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, John. I am, as John said, I do business development and sales, mostly in tech, but I've been around quite a few other industries in my day. And actually, it was in one of those industries that John and I kind of met for the first time back in our online media days. So I have a wealth of experience, but also I think I know what I know because I'm learning every day. That's how quickly sales and business development changes. That's how quickly your market and your customers change. So that's what I really love, is being reactive to those changes, changing up your pitch. And we'll get into some of these tactics later, but basically similar to PR, changing it up so that your messaging is landing in people's inboxes in the right way. So, yeah, it's a bit about me.
Perfect. Well, that's an excellent summary. And, I should probably insert a little bit of context here. One of the reasons we're talking is I think I had a bit of a crisis of faith when I was, well, for those who are watching this show 2 or 3 years from now, we're in the middle of a pandemic and business is tough. We're treading water, or I guess better than that. But there was a time right close to the beginning of the crisis where there was a bit of uncertainty. A lot of companies were actually in a lot of trouble. So I was revisiting my own strategies and ideas about how to grow the business. And Cecilia really put me back in a frame of mind and reiterated the things that I probably knew, but some things I didn't. And but some of the things I should have been thinking about and I kind of already knew, but I'd forgotten. And anyways, you know what? That's a really roundabout way of getting to the topic at hand. Cecilia, why don't you take it away and stop me from talking? I'm just
All
taking
right.
up. I'm just taking up.
What are some of the burning questions you'd like to ask? I mean, business development, it's such a broad area.
Yes. Well, I think, let's start off with a really basic outline of what, let's say, small to medium sized, let's say like a startup
Sure.
or a company that's scaling up and is looking to just do things in a very process driven, data driven way, but also in a very personalized way. I think you touched on that a little bit in our conversation. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to close all my tabs because I think Slack's going to get very noisy in a second.
Sounds good. Such a blogging pro. So I think this is similar to a lot of the companies that I work with. So tech companies, especially startups of all sizes. What you usually lack is resources and time, right? So I think it's really no surprise that sometimes it's like you have a list of 100 things to do. What's the first thing on your list to do? So when it comes to business development and sales, the first thing is it has to be a persistent effort. Similar, I guess, to, PR, John, in your world. If you do it once, it's probably not going to stick. So don't think that you have to get it right the first time, 100%. As long as you're not an asshole. Can I swear? I just did.
Absolutely. We can swear, we can drink. I've never fired off guns, but we could probably do that. We can do anything we want.
We're on the West Coast. Come on, let's dial it back. So as long as you're not an a-hole, I don't think it's going to do too much, negativity to your brand. What you do need to do is start being proactive and getting out there and getting in front of the people who you want to be talking to, your prospective customers, right? So, if you're a startup, chances are you've already had a few great case studies, and that's a great place to start. Is looking at what's made my projects or what's made my service or product successful in the past, right? Or where are those key moments that I can pull out, that I helped a client, solve their pain, or I exceeded, their expectations by X. Those sorts of nuggets will really help you in shaping what sort of business you want to go after in the future. I think the first step probably to talk about is prospecting. So how do you find all these businesses? In today's age, it's actually a lot easier. I remember, quite a while ago, I was actually doing channel sales for a manufacturer, and it was actually relying on the Yellow Pages, because a lot of people at the time didn't have access to email. They weren't on email very often. They were just, answering phones and taking orders. So it really depends on your industry in a lot of ways. But if you're talking about tech in particular, most of your clients, I'm expecting, will be found either online or through LinkedIn. So knowing who to approach, which departments are influencing parts of the sale. For example, maybe you're a marketing technology company, and it starts off in the marketing department. However, you still need to get buy-in from, let's say, legal and perhaps a few other departments. Knowing who some of those decision makers are, kind of drawing up the prospecting pipeline in that way will really help, especially if you're going after larger clients.
That's a really good summary of prospecting, and definitely you're right. There's a lot of crossover there with what we do in PR for targeting reporters. So it's finding the right fit, finding the right segment, and it's funny, you were talking about going to the Yellow Pages a while back. I remember, and there was a talk given by a tech company that had been around for a while, but there was someone who had achieved a fairly high level on a sales team. And he talked about when he was starting out in his first day, and he's like, "Where's my leads list?" And his boss was like, "You want a leads list?" And he literally chucks the phone book at him, and it lands with a thump on his desk. And he's like, "Okay, I guess I better start calling." So yeah, this is it's like night and day now with the capabilities we have for targeting people who might be good prospects to get into our sales funnel, and I'm sure you'll be talking about that next. It's funny, the flip side of this is I guess we complain about like I'm thinking of a client who he wanted me to do a bit of market research. Was a bit outside my wheelhouse, but I took it on for an afternoon and threw him a PDF that had like 2,000 names on it of various companies, and he's like, "Yeah, I can use this." And then he starts complaining about how he has to manually go through all the names and scrape all the info, and oh, this is terrible. And it's like, well, it's better than a phone book.
I mean, there are lists out there that you can purchase. Usually they're a little more expensive than I'd like, and they're usually out of date because, in tech or in other industries, people move on, right? People go on to other roles, or suddenly they're not the decision maker for whatever reason. So especially if it's a small to medium business, you can more than handle your own prospecting needs. If you're getting to the point where you're scraping data and it's becoming a trial, a whole process manually, look specifically at where you're targeting, right? If your target market is everyone, then it's going to slow you down quite a bit. So for a lot of times, if, for example, the target market is quite broad, try to break it down by, type of company. So I would say, like, look at a different vertical, right? This week, you might want to tackle the oil and gas, industry and see how they're coping with COVID-19. So having a targeted, even if it's a week or a monthly focus, will show you a lot more about that industry and also give you those insights so you can decide, is this, the industry that I want to be pursuing at this particular moment?
Hmm. I think we're giving the audience a lot of here's some
Sure.
rules, here's how to do this, here's what to do. I'm wondering if you could maybe give us an example of, a recent success story, or maybe it doesn't have to be recent, I guess,
Okay.
but, just how you have done things, or how maybe, people you've worked with have done things in a good way, or even how they've messed up and then fixed the problem and come out with a very good process.
So, yeah, I think that's great. Everyone wants to land that big fish, right? That big enterprise level client. So I'd love to tell you a little bit how I landed electronic arts at a animation agency that I was with a few years back. Called Blue Studios. They're still out in Burnaby right now. So basically, when I entered the company, I was really responsible for driving new business. They had a great track record. They were getting some great success with the people who knew them. But it was really looking at some of those key marquee clients, right? Who was really going to lift them up? What kind of logos did they need to have in order to win future work? So Electronic Arts was on my hit list, especially since we were right in their backyard. We had a lot of respect for what they were doing in marketing at the time and felt like we had certain capabilities that could help them greatly in where they wanted to go. So what I did, I didn't have a prospecting list. So I started Googling up all the different departments at EA and trying to figure out, what the lay of the land was, which kind of senior VPs were there, what kind of management was there, whom was reporting to whom, that kind of thing. Because, as pretty standard in a lot of larger organizations, some of those departments didn't even talk to each other. So understanding who the decision makers are, who I needed to influence, was really a lot of that early stage prospecting. What I usually like to do is I like to start from the top. So I usually like to engage C-suite or VP level, just because, once you have their attention, you're able to make that pitch. If you're able to get that buy-in, that just makes the rest of the process so much easier. So for the next few months, I was pounding the pavement. I was cold calling, I was cold emailing, I was cold in-mailing. I was attending every single event that EA was putting on or sponsoring, and basically, making connections at the organization. Within that few months, I had landed a meeting with a senior VP in communications. Basically, had 15 minutes, did the whole, spiel, and basically convinced them that we were a worthy vendor to look at. That led to further introductions to their facilities as well as their employee engagement departments. I can't remember, outreach departments, yeah. And unbeknownst to me at the time, those two managers, because of the work that I had been doing in outreach, had already heard about us, already heard about Blue Studios, and kind of earmarked us as kind of one of the potential companies they want to explore from some marketing initiatives coming up. So again, that just made the entire, prospecting, pitching, discovery process a lot easier. Basically went in with a few creative leads, painted the picture of what they wanted, and kind of, handled it all the way to negotiation, contract signing, and final project delivery. So that's my story.
There's so much in that, so many stages, so many little elements to it. And honestly, I think that, I mean, it was so great at showing, just the concrete tactics at work there that I think from just explaining in a sort of an academic fashion, oh, I'll do this and do that, it didn't nearly get across like, wow, that's a lot of effort. And I guess, on one side, you want to sort of manage your risk with the amount of effort that you put into any company, because, hey, it might not work out. But then if you don't put in the effort, you've got no chance. And it's very much, again, there's so much crossover between sales and business development and PR in that, like if I reach out to a reporter once, that's often not enough to land the story. I need to do a follow-up.
You might need to reach out to their editor. You might need to reach out to another writer, right?
Yeah.
You never know. And I think that's similar for even how you handle enterprise or talking about your sales pipeline, right? Is especially with enterprise, it takes longer. Things always take longer. They have processes in place. There might be a freeze of some kind, for example, a hiring freeze currently, right? That you're just not aware of when you start this process. So, I mean, I know it's a cliche, but don't put all of your eggs in one basket. So at the time that I was approaching EA, which actually landed pretty quickly, especially at that enterprise level, I was also pursuing another company called BC Hydro. That was actually through a much stricter RFP process. We did land the business, but it wasn't until 5 years actually that we had, begun that sales discovery process. So that's what I mean is that, if you think that, okay, this is my ideal client, there's no other client for me than this, that's where you start working yourself into a corner, because what if that client doesn't sign in the time that you have in your runway, right? So that's why I think prospecting, finding out the list, even if it's 20 people that you want to talk to, set yourself up a goal, right? If it's 20 or if it's 30 or whatever it is, set yourself up a goal to reach out to that many people, and look at what you've done in a week's time. It might take more than once. In fact, usually in sales, it's probably about 7 or 8 touch points until you actually get that person to respond and engage. So, I think be persistent until you hear that no. And quite honestly, every no that I get is a maybe later. Then, you haven't really ruffled anyone's feathers. You haven't really turned anyone off. So.
Yeah. It's funny. There's, I feel like modern sales and business development is so determined. We follow paths where we can measure results, and and this is why we have customer relationship management software, and yet throwing every step, every idea, every thought that you've ever had about about a client, every interaction, it's like there's sort of I feel like there's diminishing returns with the amount of time you spend documenting the relationship versus actually doing the work that gets results. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
I think it depends on how big your sales team is. So for example, for you, John, you're probably the only person doing BD at your company, right? So, you have to just keep it straight in your own head. So probably for you, a CRM is going to be of limited use because, like you said, it's going to take too much time for you to put the stuff in there for it to be useful. I would recommend, however, having it somewhere, whether it's a spreadsheet or whether it's even a paper list that sits on your desktop, just because when you have those names in front of you staring at you every single day, you're more likely to do something with them, right? Once you've written it down, I think this is true for goal setting or anything. Once you've gotten those names down and you know exactly who you're going to outreach to, you're starting to think about it, right? You're starting to think about, what's my pitch, basically? How am I going to engage these people? Maybe I should look at what this company is doing, subscribe to their newsletter, that kind of stuff. So that's how you begin that process. If it's a sales team, for example, that you've got one manager, one SDR, one account exec, anything more than that, I feel like you do owe it to yourself to look at least simple CRM software. And really the rule of thumb there is, what if I am, or any of these salespeople are hit by a bus tomorrow? Would anyone else be able to pick up and continue the conversation, or would we be scrambling around going, what did Johnny do? We don't know, right? So that's where CRM systems really come in. I think at that early level, you're really not looking at analytics too much because, usually you're just in it and doing it. I think it's always good to keep some kind of a record, just because then you can see, okay, well, out of the 20 people that I outreached to this week, 5 people got back to me. That's actually pretty good, right? It can be motivating in yourself, and I think it's a great way of kind of seeing how you improve over time.
I think that's a really good rundown of process, and also I liked how you touched on just um, uh, you sort of touched on the psychology of keeping a process going, and that if it's written down, you have a goal, you're kind of obligated to yourself to fulfill this and do these actions which are needed to get the results. Um, I think it's I guess it's cliche that sales and business development people have to have thick skins and get used to rejection, because for every win that you get, there's a lot of effort that goes into it in the lead up. So even if you eventually get to yes, there's a lot of maybes and not right now in between. Um, and then there's definitely no's from customers that maybe you thought were dynamite prospects, and turns out not to be the case. How do you keep yourself motivated to keep at it day after day?
Um, I find that usually if I set a goal for myself, I'm not too motivated to keep it. Like, for example, I think we should all be working out more, right? But who actually does it? Whereas if I set a goal and I've got other people checking in with me, relying on me, that kind of stuff, that's where it really starts to click. Because although, I have high expectations for myself, I have even more higher expectations of how I look to other people. So I think actually having someone else to keep you accountable, and in the startup world, it's pretty common if you're a founder to know other founders, right? This is a tough process for everyone. Why don't you, get together, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly, and just hash out what you've been doing, hash out what's been working. And then, by the way, that goal that we talked about last time, did you hit it or not, right? I think that can be a great motivator for people, especially if they're just starting out. The other thing I would say that, especially in tech, the more, the objection sometimes isn't no. The objection sometimes is that things are going too well. So for example, if I'm in a pitch and I'm talking about, all the great features and benefits and listening, and there's not a single question, or there isn't a, like, oh, but I don't get this, or things like that, I know that they've checked out, right? So a lot of times it's bringing it back and actually listening to what your potential customer is telling you, in opposed to selling it too hard.
Right, right. I had the person I was speaking to in a recent vlogcast about sales strategy. She has a motto, which I guess she didn't use in that particular conversation, but she often says, "Selling isn't telling," and it's a lot of listening. And if you don't understand the customer, you're never going to sell them anyway,
Yeah.
because you want it to be a win-win. So that's great. I think we've covered a lot of ground. On this topic, was there anything you wanted to add to anything we've discussed?
A resource I think that would help a lot of people, especially if you're just starting out. There is a website called Sales Impact Agency. Sales Impact Academy. Sales Impact Academy. I'm not affiliated in any way, but they do have some courses on demand, and they're very generously actually allowing free access to those courses until the end of May 2020. So, if you're thinking about how to get started, they have 3 modules up there right now. I've been taking some of them myself, just to understand a little bit more about how to build a sales team. So there's a go-to-market module, there's a demand generation, which is more, I think, in the line of marketing and PR. And there's also an outbound prospecting module. So, a lot of these things, sometimes it's helpful to have at least a guide, at least an understanding. Obviously, don't take it 100% as the golden rule of thumb, especially in these times. But, if you're curious about any more tactics or anything that we haven't discussed, that would be a good place to start.
Excellent. Or you could just re-listen to this vlogcast again and again 20 times, and you're going to get a lot out of it. So, that's great. So Cecilia Lu, how do people find you online? If they want to learn more about what you do in business development.
Yeah, definitely. I am currently job seeking at the moment, so that is a nice plug. Thank you, John. You can reach out to me through LinkedIn. That's usually where I'm around, as most salespeople are. So, yeah, I don't know if we can link that out or how we do that, but LinkedIn is usually the best way.
All right. I'm sure they will find you on LinkedIn then. Perfect.
There's not too many of me.
I don't edit these things at all, so that's gonna have to be good enough. Okay, that was perfect. Thank you very much. I've been talking with a business development consultant, Cecilia Lu, in today's episode of the Mind Meld PR vlogcast. I'm your host, Jonathon Narvey. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a great day. All right.
Thanks, John. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.